Have you ever, like, seen someone doing something and just thought to yourself, huh, what's going on in their head? Like maybe you see someone at a store and they're trying to open the door, but it's clearly closed. And you're just thinking, don't they see the sign? Why are they even
Right.
trying?
Yeah, totally. We try to figure out what other people are thinking all the time, like what they believe is true and what they want. It's how we make sense of their actions.
Exactly. And, cognitive scientists actually have a name for that. They call it theory of mind, or TOM for short. Basically, it's our ability to understand that other people have their own thoughts, beliefs, and desires, which might be different from our own.
Right. And on this deep dive, we're going to be looking at a super interesting computational approach to understanding this really fundamental human ability.
We've been digging deep into some research coming out of MIT. It's all about something called the Bayesian Theory of Mind model, which they shortened to BTOM.
It's basically like building a mathematical model for how we figure out what other people are thinking.
Yeah, think of it like you're trying to reverse engineer someone's thought process based on what you see them doing.
Exactly. And so in this deep dive, what we really want to do is unpack this BTOM model and see if it can help us understand how we figure out what's driving other people. Like, what do they believe to be true and what are they trying to achieve? And, like you said before, this isn't just some abstract idea. It's something that we do all the time in our everyday interactions.
So before we get too deep into the model, let's take a step back and talk about what exactly theory of mind is.
Sure. So at its core, theory of mind is all about our ability to explain why people do the things they do. We can even predict what they might do next based on those hidden mental states, their beliefs, desires, and intentions. And the researchers actually gave this really good example in their paper. It's about this guy named Harold who's going to the library on a Sunday.
Harold and the closed library. I remember that. Such a simple example, but it really gets the point across.
Yeah, totally. So Harold shows up at the library, all ready to check out some books. He goes up to the door, tries to open it, and of course it's locked because it's Sunday. Now think about how you would interpret this situation if you were watching this happen.
I think I would immediately start filling in the blanks about what Harold was thinking.
Hmm.
Like, why did he even go to the library if it's closed?
Exactly. And that's where theory of mind comes in. We instinctively start to make inferences about Harold's mental state. So you might think, oh, he must have really wanted to get a book, right? So you're inferring his desire.
Yeah, and I'd probably also assume that he believed the library was open on Sundays. Maybe you just forgot or something.
Right. And that's you inferring his belief, which in this case turns out to be false. But that's the whole point. We're constantly trying to figure out what other people believe to be true, even if it doesn't match up with reality.
But the paper also points out that this is a really tricky problem to solve. Because, like, couldn't there be other reasons why Harold went to the library? Maybe he just wanted to check the return slot or something?
Oh, absolutely. And that's what makes it so challenging. The researchers even call it an ill-posed problem because any single action we observe could actually come from tons of different combinations of beliefs and desires.
So, like, with Harold, maybe he desperately needed this specific book and thought, hey, even if the library's closed, maybe there's a chance it's open anyway. Or maybe he's meeting someone there who has a key.
Exactly. And the context really matters, too. Like if we saw Harold going to the library late on Saturday night with a pile of overdue books, that tells us something different than if he shows up on a Tuesday afternoon looking relaxed.
Right. It's the same action going to the library, but the context changes everything about how we interpret his beliefs and desires.
Totally. And that's what makes modeling theory of mind so interesting. You have to account for all this complexity. So how do you even begin to do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, how do researchers try to build a computational model of something as messy and nuanced as human thought?
Well, one approach, and the approach that they take in this paper, is to think about it in terms of inverse planning or inverse decision theory.
Okay, inverse planning. Break that down for me.
So the basic idea is that we can figure out someone's goals or preferences by assuming that they act in a way that helps them get what they want. Like they're trying to maximize their chances of success. They're being, in a way, rational.
So it's like if I see you ordering a latte every day, I can probably assume that you like lattes more than, say, cappuccinos.
Yeah, exactly. We see their actions and work backward to infer their preferences.
That makes sense for understanding goals.
Mm.
But the paper also emphasizes that theory of mind isn't just about goals. It's also about understanding beliefs, right? And especially the ability to understand when someone has a belief that's just plain wrong.
Absolutely. It's what separates us from, a simple computer program that just follows instructions, we can understand that other people have their own internal model of the world, and that model might be inaccurate. And that's crucial for understanding why they do the things they do.
So if we just assume that everyone was always acting on perfect information, we'd be misinterpreting their actions all the time.
Totally. And that's why this idea of false beliefs is so important in theory of mind research.
Okay, so how does this Bayesian theory of mind model actually put all of this together? Like, how does it handle these potentially inaccurate beliefs and the desires that drive people's actions?
Well, they use a framework called a partially observable Markov decision process. It's a bit of a mouthful, so they shorten it to POMDP.
POMDP. Okay, that's going to take some getting used to.
Yeah, but it's actually not as complicated as it sounds. Think of it like this. You're observing someone, the agent, moving around and making decisions in a specific environment. But the agent doesn't have perfect information about the environment. It's partially observable, which means they have to act based on what they believe to be true, even if it's not entirely accurate.
Right, so it's like they're working with a limited view of the world. Kind of like when you're playing a video game and you can only see a small portion of the map.
Exactly. And the BTOM model, as the observer, uses this thing called Bayesian inference to try to figure out the agent's hidden beliefs and desires based solely on their actions.
Bayesian inference. Remind me how that works again.
Sure. Basically, it's a way of updating our beliefs based on new evidence. So, as the model observes the agent acting in the environment, it's constantly refining its understanding of what they believe and what they want.
Okay, so POMDP is the framework. Bayesian inference is the tool. But what does this actually look like in practice?
Right. Well, the researchers use this example of a college campus with different food trucks, kind of like you see at a lot of universities. Imagine a student is walking around looking for a place to eat.
Okay, I can picture it. So the student is our agent in this scenario.
Exactly. And the model that's observing the student includes a representation of the campus layout, like where the buildings and pathways are. And it also knows the student's current location. But here's the important part. The model also includes the student's subjective desires, what kind of food they're hoping to get, and their subjective beliefs, where they think each food truck might be located.
Okay, so the model is trying to get inside the student's head and figure out both what they want and what they think they know.
Right. And the POMDP framework is really helpful here because it captures the fact that the student might not have all the information. Like, they might not know exactly where every food truck is parked. They have to make decisions based on their current beliefs, which might be incomplete or even wrong.
So how does the model actually represent the student's desires?
Well, desires are modeled as the reward that the agent expects to get from a particular outcome. So let's say the student really loves Korean food. Finding the Korean food truck would give them a high reward.
And maybe they don't like Mexican food as much, so finding that truck would give them a lower reward.
Exactly. And just like in real life, actions have a cost. So walking from one part of campus to another takes time and effort, and that's factored into the model as well.
So the student is constantly weighing their desires, the potential reward, against the cost of getting there.
Precisely. It's all about finding the most rewarding path, giving their beliefs about the world.
Okay, that makes sense for desires.
Mm.
But how about beliefs? How does the model handle those?
Well, this is where it gets really cool. Beliefs are represented as probabilities. So let's say the student isn't sure where the Lebanese food truck is. The model might assign a 50% probability that it's in one parking spot, a 30% probability that it's in another spot, and a 20% probability that it's not on campus at all today.
So it's like the student has a mental map of the campus, but it's fuzzy. There are some things they're pretty sure about and others that are more uncertain.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a really important aspect of human cognition. We rarely have perfect information. We're always dealing with some level of uncertainty.
And as the student moves around campus, they're getting new information, which might change those probabilities. Like if they walk past one parking spot and see that it's empty, that would update their beliefs about where the Lebanese truck might be.
Exactly. And the BTOM model accounts for this. It uses the principle of rational belief, which basically means that the agent updates their beliefs based on what they observe in their environment. And they do this using Bayesian belief updating, which we talked about earlier.
Okay, so the agent is acting like a little scientist, gathering data and refining their hypotheses.
Totally. And of course, the agent's observations are limited by what they can actually see. The researchers call this their line-of-sight visual access, or ISOVIST. Think of it like a cone of vision extending out from the agent.
Right, so there might be a food truck just around the corner, But if the student can't see it, they can't factor that into their decision making.
Exactly. And the model takes this into account. It knows what the agent can and cannot see at any given moment.
So it's not just about what's actually in the environment, it's about what the agent believes is in the environment.
Totally. And that's what makes this so interesting. We're trying to model not just the world itself, but the agent's perception of the world.
Okay, so we've got desires, which are like rewards, and beliefs, which are probabilities. But how do those actually translate into action? Like, how does the model predict what the student will do next?
Right. Well, that's where the principle of rational action comes in. The model assumes that the agent plans their actions in a way that's consistent with their beliefs and desires. They're trying to maximize their expected reward while also taking into account the cost of each action.
So it's like a balancing act between exploring the environment to find more rewarding options and exploiting the options that they already know about.
Exactly. It's like if the student knows there's a decent pizza place nearby, they might just go there. But if they're really craving Korean food, they might be willing to spend more time searching for the Korean truck, even if it means risking a longer walk or a higher cost.
So the model is basically saying, given what the student believes and what they want, what's the most rational course of action?
Yeah, exactly. And to do this, the model keeps track of all the possible combinations of beliefs and desires that the agent could have. It's called a hypothesis space.
Like a giant list of all the possible explanations for the student's behavior.
Right. And then, for each of those hypotheses, the model calculates how likely it is that the student would have taken the actions we've observed if that hypothesis were true. It combines this with some initial assumptions, or priors, to figure out the most likely explanation.
Okay, so the model is constantly comparing its predictions to the actual behavior of the student and updating its beliefs about what's going on in their head.
Exactly. And that's the essence of Bayesian inference. It's all about refining our beliefs based on new evidence.
I'm starting to get it now. So let's go back to that food truck example. You mentioned figure 2 in the paper, which shows how this works in practice. Can you walk us through that?
Absolutely. So in this example, there are 3 types of food trucks: Korean, Lebanese, and Mexican. But there are only 2 parking spots available. The student can see one of the spots, which has the Korean food truck, but the other spot is hidden behind a building.
So there's some uncertainty right from the start. The student doesn't know if the Lebanese or Mexican truck is there or if it's empty.
Exactly. And the model reflects this uncertainty by assigning probabilities to each possibility. Now, watch what happens. The student starts walking towards the Korean truck, but then they walk past it.
Interesting. Why would they do that?
Well, that's the key. If
Yeah.
the student only wanted Korean food and believed it was their only option, they would have just gone straight there. The fact that they kept walking suggests that they might be hoping to find either the Lebanese or the Mexican truck.
So they're willing to explore a bit, even though it means a slightly longer walk?
Exactly. They're balancing their desire for a particular type of food against the cost of searching for it. Now, they go behind the building and discover the Lebanese truck in the hidden parking spot. But here's the thing. Instead of stopping to eat at the Lebanese truck, they turn around and go back to the Korean truck.
Whoa, that's a twist.
Right. And this is where the BTOM model really shines. By observing this entire sequence of actions, walking towards the Korean truck, bypassing it to explore, finding the Lebanese truck, and then going back to the Korean truck, the model can infer some pretty interesting things about the student's desires.
So it's not just about the final choice. It's about the entire path they took to get there.
Exactly. And what the model infers is that the student prefers Korean food over Lebanese food. But because they initially bypassed the Korean truck to explore, the model also infers that they probably have an even stronger preference for the unseen Mexican truck. It's like they're thinking, hey, maybe the Mexican truck is back there, it's worth a shot.
That's amazing. The model is picking up on these subtle cues and using them to infer the student's underlying preferences, even though they never explicitly stated them.
Exactly. And that's the power of this computational approach. It can take these seemingly random actions and turn them into a coherent story about the agent's mental state.
So it's like the model is watching a silent film and trying to write the dialogue.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. It's filling in the gaps based on the information it has.
So how exactly does the model represent this food truck scenario mathematically?
Well, it simplifies the campus into a grid, and the student can move north, south, east, west, or stay put. They can also choose to eat at a food truck. The students' observations are limited to what they can see from their current location on the grid, that isovist we talked about. And each action has a cost associated with it, like the time it takes to move from one spot to another.
And the reward for eating at each food truck corresponds to how much the student likes that type of food.
Exactly. And the model uses this information to calculate the optimal plan for the student, given their current beliefs and desires. It uses something called a softmax function to determine the probability that the student will choose each possible action.
So it's not saying that the student will definitely do this or that. It's saying that there's a certain probability that they'll choose each option based on their current state of mind.
Exactly. And this probabilistic approach is what makes the model so powerful. It captures the inherent uncertainty of human behavior.
Okay, I'm following you. So we've got this model that can predict the student's actions based on their beliefs and desires. But how do we know if it actually works? Like, does it match up with how humans actually reason about other people's minds?
That's a great question. And to test this, the researchers conducted a series of experiments with human participants. They showed them animations of these little agents, basically blue sprites moving around in simple environments with food trucks and buildings, very similar to the scenario we just discussed.
And what did the participants have to do?
Well, they were asked to infer the agent's desires for each type of food truck, like how much did the agent want to eat Korean food versus Lebanese food. And they were also asked to judge the agent's beliefs about the location of the hidden food trucks.
So they were essentially trying to do what the model was doing, but in their own heads.
Exactly. And the researchers wanted to see if the model's predictions matched up with the participants' judgments.
And did they?
They did. In fact, the correlation was really strong, especially when it came to inferring desires. They even calculated a correlation coefficient, an R value of 0.90, which is considered very high.
That's impressive. So it seems like the model is doing a pretty good job of capturing how humans reason about other people's desires.
Yeah, and the correlation for beliefs was a bit lower, but still pretty good. It was around 0.76.
Interesting. So it seems like we're better at figuring out what people want than what they believe.
That seems to be the case. And there's actually some evidence from developmental psychology that supports this. It suggests that our understanding of desires develops earlier in childhood than our understanding of beliefs.
That makes sense, actually. Like, a baby can understand that someone wants a toy, even if they don't fully grasp the concept of false beliefs.
Exactly. And it's probably because desires are often more directly expressed through actions. Like, if someone reaches for a cookie, it's pretty clear that they want it. But beliefs are more internal and harder to observe directly.
Okay, so the BTOM model seems to be doing a good job of predicting human judgments. But the researchers didn't just stop there, right? They also wanted to see if those specific features we talked about, beliefs and belief updating, were really essential to the model's success.
Right. They wanted to make sure it wasn't just getting lucky. So they created two simpler versions of the model, which they called lesioned models. It's like they were surgically removing parts of the model to see how it would perform without them.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
But what were these lesioned models like?
Well, the first one was called Truebull. This model assumed that the agent always had perfect information about the environment. Like they knew exactly where all the food trucks were, even if they couldn't see them.
So no uncertainty, no need for beliefs.
Exactly. And the second lesioned model was called Noobs. This one was the opposite. It assumed that the agent had an initial set of beliefs about the environment, but they never updated those beliefs based on new observations.
So they were stuck with their initial assumptions no matter what they saw.
Right. And as you might expect, both of these lesioned models performed significantly worse than the full BTOM model.
So it really does seem like those features, beliefs, and belief updating are crucial for capturing how humans reason about other people's minds.
Exactly. It's not enough to just know what's out there in the world. You have to understand how the agent perceives the world and how they change their mind based on new information.
And that's what the BTOM model does so well.
It really does. The researchers also looked at some specific examples from their experiment, which are shown in Figure 4 of the paper. They found that the model was sensitive to all sorts of subtle cues, like how far the agent had to travel to get a new piece of information, or whether they checked a hidden location before going to a food truck they had already seen.
And in all of these cases, the model's predictions closely matched the judgments made by the human participants.
Exactly. It was really remarkable how well the model captured the nuances of human reasoning.
So to sum up, it seems like this Bayesian Theory of Mind model is a pretty big step forward in our understanding of how we make sense of other people's actions.
Absolutely. It's a really elegant framework that combines desires, beliefs, and Bayesian inference to explain a wide range of social behaviors.
And it has some interesting implications for other areas of research, like developmental psychology in artificial intelligence.
Totally. Like, imagine if we could program robots with this kind of model. They'd be able to understand our intentions and anticipate our needs in a much more human-like way.
That's a really cool thought. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's a key takeaway you want our listeners to walk away with?
I think the most important thing is that this research shows just how sophisticated our everyday social reasoning is. We're constantly making these complex inferences about other people's mental states, weighing their beliefs against their desires, and trying to figure out what makes them tick.
It's like we're all amateur mind readers.
In a way, we are. And this Bayesian theory of mind model gives us a glimpse into the inner workings of that mind-reading process.
And it also highlights the importance of understanding that other people might have different beliefs than we do, and that those beliefs shape their actions even if they're not accurate.
Exactly. It's a call for empathy and understanding. We need to recognize that everyone is acting based on their own internal model of the world, and that model might be very different from our own.
So the next time you see someone doing something that seems puzzling, try to step back and think about what they might believe and what they might want. You might be surprised at what you discover.
Absolutely. And if you're interested in learning more about this research, I highly recommend checking out the original paper. It's fascinating stuff.
And you can also explore the wider field of theory of mind research, which is full of incredible insights into the human mind.
Totally. It's a field that's constantly evolving and revealing new things about how we understand ourselves and each other.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Bayesian theory of mind. We hope you found it as mind-blowing as we did.
It was a pleasure being here.
Until next time, keep those minds curious.